And even better, he knows that
All right, welcome back. Okay. I am almost done grading your midterms. I finished my column ones already because it was a smaller section. What time does your last class finish tomorrow?
We don't have class tomorrow.
Well, it's online.
It depends on the person.
So will none of you be here tomorrow?
Correct. I will. That's not true. That's not true. People have different classes.
Okay, how many will actually?
I don't have.
How many will actually be here tomorrow? Oh, okay, that's better. Okay, but here's the rub. The first meetings are on Saturday. In the event that I don't get the papers back to Christina by tomorrow, none of you will be here on Friday, right? Is that okay? That much is sure.
No, what we have Friday.
You'll be here on Friday? Okay. No, but I need to know this because if you're not going to be here on Friday, I'm not going to kill myself grading by tomorrow night. I'll just give it to you on Saturday. Will you be here on Friday?
Saturday's fine.
Just stick with everyone's decision.
Yeah.
Okay, then I will just plan to give. So here's what we're going to do. I'll just plan to give you your papers back either Thursday, and if you can't get them Thursday, Friday. If you can't get them Friday, Saturday. But what I do need you to do is actually review your paper before our meeting. Understand? So in the event that you don't pick up Thursday or Friday, just come by maybe an hour beforehand, your first appointment, and I'll give you your paper and review it and then come back. Is that fair? That way I don't make you have to come in on Friday. And if you're the 8 a.m. appointment, we'll figure something else out. But try and come by beforehand, a reasonable time. I'll give you your paper. Just knock on the door. I'll give it to you. And then review it. Because these things are not valuable if you don't review it beforehand. Now, I'm sorry. Yeah?
If our appointment isn't until next week, can we pick up our...
Yeah, normal. Yeah, normal. I don't know if I'm done by Thursday. That's a problem. I'm going to try as hard as I can, but I can only so many hours in the day, and current events sometimes overtake my time in which I don't anticipate. It's a burden of birth, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I'll have a piece in the Wall Street Journal on that topic probably later today or so you'll see it soon. Anyway, but yeah, so if you don't pick it up Thursday or Friday, just come by earlier. And if you come to your appointment at the exact time you haven't reviewed yet, I'll say come back later. I will be here all day. Okay? Any other questions on that? 1 second. Okay. Okay. So are there any other questions? By the way, your midterms are pretty good. I don't know if it's because you've taken me already, but the sort of rookie mistakes I usually see are just not present. So you went through the process. So more or less, I think I made the exam too easy. Because the grades, no, you're saying no. No, but that's a compliment. It's a compliment to you because actually you've exceeded what I expect from midterm. So good. No, it's good. No, it's a good sign. I mean, so far pretty good. I mean, it all curves. It doesn't matter. I know. You're stuck with me again. Take me again in this for First Amendment. 3 in a row. Okay. No, but I'm proud of you. I mean that. Your midterms from last term compared to your midterm this term, it's like a world of difference. So it's the same group of people. I can actually compare A to B. So you're doing a lot stronger. Okay. Where am I? Okay. So we're continuing our discussion of the takings clause. In our last class, we did the Kelo case. And this is a very popular, very controversial case. And in this case, you had a situation where the community wanted to seize a group of homes, not to transfer to a developer, but to stimulate economic activity by transferring it to a developer. And that distinction makes a very important difference, right? If they're simply taking from A and giving it to B, I think then all 9 justices would say that that's unlawful. But the court said by 5-4 vote, it's okay, because they're not taking it to give to B, they're taking it to improve to the economy by giving it to B. And that intermediary step, I think, makes a difference between kilo. Okay? Make sense? All right, so why does this matter? That case is difficult because it turns on what the meaning of public use is, right? What does public use mean? We're not going to return to the public use clause for the rest of the semester. You get 1 case on it. Kilo is all you get. The rest of the semester focuses on this word, taken, or taking, if you want to use it in the other form, right? At what point does a law, is that a hand, Kaylin? Okay, thank you. At what point does a law become a taking? And what makes this topic complicated is that the courts have developed different groupings of takings. Okay, I'm calling them groupings, there's no better word. Today, the topic is what's called a categorical regulatory taking. My God, what the hell is that, right? Categorical regulatory taking. I want to break this down 1 word at a time. Okay, so you already know what a taking is, right? A taking is some government action that reduces the value of property. Justice Holmes said in Penn Colby Mahon, which you haven't read yet, but you'll read shortly, that when a regulation goes too far, right, when a regulation goes too far, government's got to pay for it. So that's what a taking is. Now, what's this phrase regulatory? A regulatory taking refers to a taking where you get to keep your property. Okay? Suzette Kilo did not get to keep her house, her little pink house, right? She had to move it across town. With an eminent domain, you don't keep your property. You lose it. You get nothing. You get some money. With a regulatory taking, it's a different story. You keep your land, but it's reduced in value. You keep your land, but it's reduced in value. So for example, maybe the government makes you nail a wire on the wall, like in this case. Or maybe the government makes you, tells you you can't build on your beachfront property because you need to help the environment. Or maybe the government tells you you can no longer, or you have to put some more sand back into the beach to help restore the beach, right? You keep Blackacre. You don't lose Blackacre. But with a regulatory taking, your value of property has been reduced. Okay? Everyone with me? So when you see the phrase regulatory taking, you have to keep in your mind, you get to keep Blackacre. You get to keep Blackacre. However, it's worthless. Not worthless, it's worth less. It's not worth the same because your use of it has been diminished. Everyone with me? Okay. So we got taking, we got regulatory, then we have this word, categorical. It probably doesn't mean what you think it means, right? In law, we have different types of tests. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of a balancing test, right? Where maybe you have like 4 different factors, and then the courts weigh this factor, and they weigh that factor, and then they do this whatever, right? I'm not a fan of balancing tests. They're so malleable, you can make them balance any way you want, but they exist. The opposite of a balancing test is what might be called a categorical rule. And to give you an easy example you've studied, think of torts, think of negligence versus strict negligence, right? Think of defamation versus defamation per se. Sound familiar, right? Think of rape and statutory rape, right? When you have a categorical bright line rule, there's no balancing. If the person was under 18, that's the age of consent, it's rape. Doesn't matter. Consent is not a defense. If you have some highly explosive material and it blows up, too bad. You don't consider the negligence determination. It's a per se strict liability tort. If you engage in some acts of defamation that are so bad, it's defamation per se. You don't have to balance, right? So in your other first-year classes, you've had this categorical bright line per se rule. And by the way, categorical, bright line, per se, it's all the same thing. It all has the same significance. It means there's no balancing that goes on, right? If you meet certain conditions, you check a box, there's liability. Okay? A categorical taking has no balancing involved. And the first case, Loretto, is an example of that. If the government does something to your property, and we'll discuss exactly what that is, but if the government installs something on your property, the wire on the side of the building, that's a taking. The court doesn't balance, well, how big is the wire, or how much money are you losing? None of that matters. It's a taking. When you determine compensation, that can fluctuate, right? A bigger wire might require a bigger compensation. But the key question for us today is there actually a taking? And what we'll study today is a categorical regulatory taking means if you meet the conditions of Loretto, it's an automatic taking. No question about it. If you meet Loretto, it's a taking. The flip side of this, right? The flip side of this is you have the opposite of a categorical taking, which we'll cover in class next week. The other kinds of takings involve very difficult and complex balancing tests, where if they're not physically taking your property, you go to these complicated balancing tests. We'll do that for the next 2 weeks or so. But for now, enjoy. This is easy, right? The rule in Loretto, I can state with standing on one foot. It's very simple. The rule in the next case called Penn Central, you're going to hate, because I hate it. It's a terrible case to teach. But this case is easy. All right? So just when you see categorical, think of it that if you fit in this category of takings, it's automatic. Right? There's no dispute. It's per se. It's automatic. It's strict. But just the word categorical often throws students off. That's why I spend several minutes discussing this at the outset of class. All right. So any questions on that? Categorical regulatory taking. No? Okay. So let's do a poll question, and this will get us thinking about Loretto a bit. So here's your question, please. It says this. Under the police power, a city can require the installation of smoke detectors in apartment buildings. True or false? Okay. All right. Who am I up to? Yes, Caitlin. All right, so let me just take a step back here, right? So remind us, Caitlin, what is the police power? Just remind us that much.
Police power is like what the government do with kind of taking under property.
Whoa. Can do a what?
Not a taking.
Not a taking. Very good, right? But what is the police power in general? Forget about takings for a minute.
It's a use that the government can use your land for.
For what purpose?
Promote the general welfare.
Yeah, what are those four categories? Remember? We've done these a couple times. Your general welfare is a good category, but there's a couple of them.
Health, safety, welfare, and moral.
Very good, right. The health, safety, welfare, and public morals of the people. So Caitlin is putting a smoke detector in an apartment building with very high stairs, promoting public safety. You think so? Okay. Now, so here's the question. Is it a taking? Is forcing an apartment building to install smoke detectors a taking that requires government compensation?
I mean, in terms of Loretto, kind because Loretto was installing cables.
Yeah. And I mean, if you ever install a smoke detector, it's usually connected to a system, right? Connected to sprinklers. You have to wire it. You got to put electricity, right? There's drilling that's going on. So, Caitlin, is this a taking? Does the government need to give compensation then for every smoke detector they install in the city? I don't know, Esther. What do you think?
I feel like no.
You feel like the answer is no, but what does Loretto say?
The Loretto was like yes, but then like the dissent was like the opposite.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I got this. Yeah. Very good. So I got this question actually from Justice Black. No relation. Justice Harry Blackmun's dissent. It's spelled different. It's M-U-N. But I got this from Justice Blackmun's dissent, and I think he actually makes a fairly compelling point here, right? Under the police power, the government tells you to do lots of things. Install smoke detectors, right? Install sprinkler systems. Install mirrors in elevators. By the way, I always ask this for Texas. Do you know why you put mirrors in the corners of elevators? Not to scare people. Why? Why? See who's hiding. Yeah, this is a New York thing. You know this, right? Because when you walk into an elevator, someone can be standing right by the button panel. So you look in the corner, see if they're standing, right? Yeah. See, people. I've been out of New York a long time, but some things you don't forget. People get robbed in elevators all the time. It's very common because you just wait there, and then there's like a good 30 seconds to the next floor where they pull the stop, and then you're stuck. Yeah. Taking the stairs is not better. I'm so glad I don't live there anymore. Okay. But yes, Loretto seems to establish what they call the categorical rule, where if you basically hammer something into a wall, it's a taking that requires compensation. But I think Caitlin and Esther, their intuitions are correct. It can't be the case that every time the government makes you put a smoke detector in an apartment building, they have to pay you for compensation, right? Could the government actually function like that? If every single time a smoke detector was installed in every apartment building in the city, the government had to pay you X dollars, whatever, 50 cents, whatever is a quarter, whatever happens to be. So there's a tension, right? As easy as it is to state the rule in Loretto, applying it becomes a lot more difficult because the court will often fluctuate back and forth between, oh, that's a taking, and oh, that's just police power. And the key difference is this. When you're exercising the police power, you don't have to pay. You don't have to go to court. You don't have to have a declaration of public use. But when you exercise the taking, you got to go to court. You got to pay compensation. You have to go through process. It can be appealed. It's a long road. So your challenge is to try to figure out where to draw the line between a taking and the police power. Loretto seems easy. I think Horn, the raisin case, is actually a lot easier. They're taking the damn raisins. But the last case, Hattercheck, is trickier. It's trickier. Okay, so any questions on that? And again, I think given you're gonna hate my answer here. I think given the answer in Loretto, that's a taking. But given reality and the way our world works, it's not a taking. So I think the truths are describing how the world works, and the falses are describing what the holding in Loretto happens to be. Wouldn't you like to know? I think the answer is true. I think that's the better of the two answers. So the 90% of you who put this. Okay. All right. What are we up to next? Oh, you're next. All right. So do you want to give us, please, the facts in Loretto, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
This person in Loretto bought actually apartment building before it realized that there was this, before she realized that there is this law that states that you have to get permission to install pole wires.
Mm-hmm.
And then the court stated that that the reason behind it was to, for the police power purpose, which was eliminating landlord fees and conditions that never been up with the
Okay.
which is important educational and community benefit.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so we have a case here. Now, let me give you a little bit of background on the technology, because this might be foreign to people who don't know this technology. Back in the day, cable TV was called cable TV because you had to literally run a cable into your home, right? It wasn't like underground. It was literally a wire into your house. And in places like Manhattan, they would do this in a very strange fashion, where they would run a cable from one apartment building across the street to the next apartment building, right? Think of like Spider-Man, like swinging from building to building. Basically that, but you know, cable. This was not done with the government's knowledge initially, right? You had these cable companies who would just pay an apartment complex saying, let us install this, and this way we can charge your customers certain dollars a month to get the subscription, right? Because they can access this cable TV. New York said, well, this is a good idea. We want to have public television. They said this is a public use, right? Everyone can use cable TV. It's effectively a common carrier because they can't deny you service if you pay the price, right? If you think about it, Comcast is a common carrier. They need to give you service if you're in the community where they let that. They can charge you a hell of a lot of money for it, but they're fixed rates that are set. So New York then enacts a law. And the law says that landlords are required to permit these TV companies to install cable facilities on the property. They can't interfere with the installation. They can't demand special payments. And they get a compensation. $1. They get $1. That's it. So Teleprompter was the name of one of the companies, the cable companies, and they were given a permission, a franchise, to install lines in a certain area. Now again, idea, why does this implicate the takings clause, right? Why, if this is a private company installing these lines, why is the Fifth Amendment even implicated? But isn't it a private company? Can a private company take property? I mean, is that unconstitutional if a private company nails a wall, a wire in your wall?
But there was a law.
Bingo. Bingo, exactly. The reason why this case implicates the takings clause is there's a law. And the law requires Loretto to deal with this company. She has no choice. And because the law requires Loretto to deal with this company, it implicates the Fifth Amendment. Okay? So Loretto complained. Now, Roxy, tell me, how much of a burden was this law on Loretto? I mean, just let's be realistic for a moment.
Realistically, probably not that much. I think it was the cable and
Well, what was like the size of the cable?
it was slightly less than half an inch in diameter
Yeah, half an inch. Okay.
and approximately 30 feet in length.
Very good, very good. And there are also these boxes. So, I mean, this is an old picture, and I'm pretty sure this is the cable. I'm not positive, but just pretend because it's close enough. You basically have this conduit going up the building. And on the roof, they put these silver boxes, which were bolted into the cement. And that's it. So, Roxy, I'll ask you the question again. How burdensome was this cable in your mind?
In reality, it wasn't a huge burden, but they go into both sides. It doesn't really matter. It's like a picture.
It does. It's oh, God. I'm getting in trouble. You're correct. You're trying to get happy Halloween, everyone. So yeah, the court found the fact that it was only, a couple inches by 30 feet doesn't make a difference. Oh God. I had to say that sentence. It's out. Okay, fine. Move on. So the court walked through this, and it's a very I'm in trouble now. A very bundle of sticks analysis. I can't. But the court describes that even though it's a minimal intrusion upon Loretto's property, you have 3 important elements of her bundle of sticks that are deprived. Now, we discussed this last semester in great length, right? When we think of property, it's not just one item. There are different strands in a bundle, right? Different bundles in a stick. And we discussed the right to exclude. Remember the case involving the trailer home that was driven across the woman's property and they had the punitive damages? And then we did State v. Shack was with the migrant workers, right? Where they could exclude the aid workers from the farm. Remember this one? So we discuss in property a right to exclude. And we say that the right to exclude is the most important stick in the bundle, right? Right? So, Eduardo, right? Yeah, Eben. With respect to the right to exclude, did New York's law limit Loretto's right to exclude? Putting this cable on the side of her wall, did it limit her right to exclude?
Not necessarily, no.
Why do you say that?
Because I mean, like the right to exclude, like, well, I guess it did because she can't exclude like the workers
from what? Where can't you exclude the workers from?
From any place in her property.
To do what?
To like work with the
installation, exactly, right? So she's required to admit the workers onto her roof and onto the side of the building to actually install the cables. But after they do the installation, can she now exclude whoever she wants? Does the right to exclude only apply to the workers?
Yeah, I believe so.
No? Yeah? What do you think? Can't see. James? No, I'm sorry. Wrong guy. Harrison, right? Harrison. Is there a right to exclude here?
I believe so.
Okay. What can she not exclude?
I guess she can't exclude the government coming in and install.
Okay, that's people, right? But I'm not talking about people here. What else does a right to exclude implicate?
Oh, non-possessory use of property.
Be more specific.
Basically, having people use your property in such a way that you wouldn't conform with what you were doing.
Specifically here.
Having people, or having a cable
The
installation.
cable. The cable is the issue, right? Now, she has a lot of property, right? Here she has a wall, here she has a wall. She can do anything she wants over here and over here and over here, but she can't do what she wants here. She can't exclude from this 1/2 inch space. She cannot exclude from that 1/2 inch space. Everyone understand? And that's important. The court explains that the right to exclude is very important. And even if it's a 1 inch space where you can no longer exclude and decide what to do with it, there's an intrusion upon her right. Okay? Everyone with me? And I realize, I don't know why I just did that. I usually do that one. So, Costa, you seem very confused by that one.
About that answer?
No, the jumping. Yeah, I don't know. I said I had a mental lapse. I'm sorry. It's all right. Well, I'll come back to you. We'll just do this way. Oh, you know what? Fine, Costa. We'll go here. All right, so Costa, because you look like, whoa, he's going over there. I don't know why I did that. I sometimes had a mental lapse. I don't know. Wasn't well thought out. I apologize. So Costa, let me ask you this question, though, right? What happens if, let's say there's a fire in the building on the roof, and the fire department shows up and they put a ladder against the wall. A ladder's on about 4 or 5 feet in width, whatever, right? And the firefighters climb up that ladder and they put out the fire. They come back down, they move the ladder away. Can Ms. Loretto sue them for a taking for those hour when that ladder was on the wall. Because again, she could not exclude that ladder.
It's not permanent though.
What difference does it make?
It's a permanent exclusion.
Ah, okay. So here's the important point, right? Justice Marshall makes a couple distinctions that are important. He says, well, this cable is some sort of intrusion or an invasion maybe, right? But the reason why it's problematic is because it's permanent. The example I gave you a minute ago involving a firefighter putting his ladder, it's actually a good example, I still have that one. Firefighter putting a ladder against the wall is different because it's only temporary. So with respect to the right to exclude, if it's temporary, it's not going to be a taking. So you see the court here starts building its test for these categorical takings. Okay? The court also discusses, Justin, the right to use the property, right? How is her right to use infringed?
By not being able to decide whether or not those tables or boxes should be.
Yeah. She can't decide what to do with her own property. The government made the decision for her. So therefore, the right to use stick is limited, right? And Khadijah, last one. How does this restrict her right to dispose of or sell or convey the property?
Well, since David's on her right, she doesn't have to go back to sticks, which means she doesn't have to accept the rule.
Oh, good. So what does this do to a resale value if you want to sell it to somebody else?
It's gonna reduce.
Bingo. That's the key point, right? She can sell it, but one second. But now when she sells it, it's not, I'm selling you this building in fee simple. I'm selling it to you in fee simple minus this, right? You can't do it this, right? And someone might say, I don't want that. It's an ugly wire. I don't want that in my building. But they're stuck with it.
I thought in the case though they talk about how cable adds to the property value.
Says who?
The court?
Well, no, but does everyone agree with that? Did Loretto agree with that?
Oh, I guess not.
Yeah, not everyone agrees with it. I mean, look, you have this beautiful building, the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Who wants this ungodly cable coming down the side of your structure? Right, a pre-war building. I'm being facetious here, but value is in the eye of the beholder. And someone might want cable TV, and someone says we don't want TV. So it actually depends. But that was an argument given by New York saying, well, don't be such an idiot, Loretto. We're actually helping your property value. And the court said, we get to decide that, not you. And then the Supreme Court reversed that. That was what the New York court held.
So it's not what a reasonable person, it doesn't matter that they would like that.
Wait till you read the next case, right? For next class. In the next class, we'll do a case called Penn Central. And here's what you had. You had a train station in Manhattan. And they wanted to build a tower on top of their train station with all those air rights. And the city said, you can't build there as a landmark. He said, but don't worry, you can build a tower somewhere else. It's good for you. So we want to build a tower. No, you can build a tower somewhere else. Transfer it across town. So the court said, that's fine, right? As long as you get some value, it's good enough. Doesn't feel value you want, but some value. Just wait till you get to the next class. If you're upset by this, just wait for that one. You don't care. Doesn't matter. Okay. All right, so the court says that the New York law interferes with your right to possess, right to use, and right to dispose of the property. But then it starts drawing a line. Right? It draws a line that is somewhat puny. I think that's the way the dissent calls it, right? So you have a temporary physical invasion versus a permanent physical occupation. Who made this test up? I couldn't tell you, but it's pretty bad. But this is your test. The wire, they say, is a permanent physical occupation. That it's going to be there forever, and it's going to occupy the space. Think of the ladder, the firefighter ladder, the example I gave you a minute ago. It's invading your space for sure, but it's only temporary. So permanent physical invasion. When you have a permanent physical invasion, It's a categorical regulatory taking. It's automatic. When you have a temporary physical invasion, it's only police power. So again, you're seeing which bucket you fit into. Do you fit into the categorical regulatory taking bucket, in which case you got to pay compensation? Or are you fitting into the police power bucket, in which case you don't have to pay compensation? Now, someone raise your hand and say, Josh, whoa, whoa, whoa. What's the difference between a temporary versus physical? I'm sorry, temporary versus permanent? There's not a good line. And I'll give you one better. Is the cable there actually permanent? In the sense that it'll be there forever? I bring up the Google Maps, right? And this was taken in 2017. I don't know that the cable's there anymore, right? I mean, that might be it, but it might be something else. I think it's actually this property, but let's assume it's not there, right? Let's assume that now everyone has, satellite TV, or the cable comes in from underground. Let's assume that, they don't need this law anymore. Is anything actually permanent? That means it'll be there forever. All buildings eventually disappear. You have the pyramids of Egypt have been around thousands of years, but most things are gone, right? Most things vanish. Do they actually mean permanent, or do they mean it's going to be there for a long time? And if it means it's going to be there for a long time, how long is a long time? This test is not very satisfying, and Justice Blackmun raised, I think, some fair points in the dissent, which we'll get to in a minute. But do you have to apply this? And let me give you a very close to home example. So during Hurricane Harvey, I'm sure as many of you know, the Army Corps of Engineers made some decisions. There are these reservoirs out in West Houston, and they decided to release some of them to reduce flooding. And the thinking was, if they didn't release these floodings, then the dams could break and basically wipe out downtown Houston. So they had these controlled releases. But they decided to flood some neighborhoods and not others. So there were some areas that actually didn't get flooded by the storm, by Harvey. They were flooded by the subsequent releases of water from these reservoirs. And I know people whose houses, they had no water in the storm, then a couple of days later they were underwater. Is that flooding a taking? Is it a temporary physical occupation that the water was there for a few days? Or a week? Is that long enough? Or was it permanent and that destroyed the property because of the water, made it uninhabitable? This is an issue that's being litigated now. It's one I've been keeping a close eye on. I think at least one court allowed this case to go forward, saying that was a taking, that the nature of the flooding. Now, just to balance it out, it's a tough choice, because if you don't release the water, then the dam could break and then the entire state of Houston will be destroyed. And this is not a hypothetical. It's an earthen dam. It can only hold so much water, and it could just flood downtown. It'd be very, very bad. So these are hard legal questions. And if so, what's the correct measure of compensation? So there are a lot of property owners in the West Houston area who are involved in class actions and the like to get recovery. It sucks. I don't know if there's a correct answer to the legal question, but it's really tough, really tough. Did anyone have any thoughts on that one, or maybe some local knows? Yeah.
I'll say, yeah, my neighborhood where I grew up in completely flooded, but my mom's house was only one of 3 that stayed dry.
Was it a high elevation? Mm-hmm. Just by a little bit, right?
And everyone put their stuff all over our yard for like days. But I know the class action the neighborhood is doing is still making its way. It's using a theory of inverse condemnation.
We will discuss inverse condemnation. So let me just, because Andrew mentioned it, let me discuss this for a minute. We'll do. Oh no, we don't. They took this out of your book. I'm so mad. Ugh, they took out the inverse condemnation. I actually sent the author a stern email about this. It was very good decisions they took out. But let me, because Andrew mentioned it, let me get it. Usually with eminent domain, the government condemns your property, right? Think of Suzette Kilo, right? They want to condemn her property with eminent domain to take it. They said, here, we're going to take your property, then we'll give you money. And Kilo said, no, you can't take it because there's not a public use. Inverse condemnation is the opposite. It's where the government says, hey, we didn't do anything. But you say, yes, you did. You took my property, and you got to pay me for it. Inverse condemnation is the person says, the government took my property, and now I want money for it. And the government says, no, we didn't take your property. This was police power, right? We were just exercising our water distribution method, whatever the hell it is, right? So inverse condemnation is the way you get compensation. And the litigation takes place in what's called the Court of Federal Claims, which is a court in Washington, D.C. It's actually right across the street from the White House. If you ever go there in Lafayette Park, the Court of Federal Claims is right there. So it's a long process. I don't even think it's gone to a trial yet, but I think it went through the initial motions. But thank you for that insight. Oh, I was so mad they took out the inverse condemnation classes. They're good cases. Yeah, Brittany here?
I asked this question, I think last class, and
Yeah.
so I'll ask again.
Uh-oh.
So in the event that, let's say for this water, or insert takings here, or under the guise of police power, are there any other ways to seek legal redress under, like, if they're approached with this? So like if that's what happens and the government or the court is like, no, it's police power, like what other options do people have? I mean, to
Right,
combat this?
right. So if you can succeed with an inverse condemnation suit, you get compensation, right? You get paid.
I'm talking, not even talking about inverse condemnation, let's say.
In general. If the
let's say
government,
if it was
too damn bad. So if the government enacts a land use regulation that limits the value of your property, and the court said this is a police power exercise, and that's the end of the story. That's it. So you'll do a case next class, Penn Central, where you had, again, the train station wants to build a tower on top of the train station worth millions and millions of dollars. And the government said, no, you can't build it there, build it somewhere else. And they lost, and that was it. Build it maybe somewhere else. You don't like that answer?
I just, I know you don't like the word fair. So I'm just thinking about just broader public policy.
Well, you can lobby, right? I mean, look.
It's against public policy to
yeah.
take away things from private
Well, they're not
citizens.
taking it. They're just, you're keeping what you have. Just can't do something new.
Like live there? Okay.
Wait, there is a case which, again, I think we're doing next week called Lucas versus South Carolina Coastal Commission, where the government basically says that you can't build property by your beachfront resort, right? You can't build there, but you can maybe pitch a tent and live there in a tent.
I'm not talking about, even, the issues like what we talked about,
Yeah.
classes that go about zoning and like, I'm talking about you were already there abiding by zoning requirements or X, Y, Z, and someone wants to come in, the government
And flood your-
in particular, and say, you are no longer able to live here, you are no longer able
Well,
to access
is
your land or whatever it is.
so if you demolish the house, is the land habitable? In other words, is the government saying you can't live there, or are they saying you can't live there in a specific house that might have existed beforehand?
I mean, they're taking your land, so you're owning the land. I'm not talking about just owning that.
But how are they taking your land?
What do you, I'm
So are we using the flooding example?
No.
Okay.
Just any time where the government uses police power, when they are actually, when you think about realistically, they're actually taking your land.
Okay, Kilo, for example, right?
Yes.
Easy example, right? Oh, you get your compensation, move elsewhere. Right. The basis of eminent domain is old, right? The government's long had the power to take your property to pay you for it. The dispute is whether they have to pay you for it or whether it's public use, right? Those are the questions. But if it's a public use, you lose. Yeah. I mean, states can increase the protections of property. Like states can make it harder to use public domain. I'm sorry, eminent domain for economic development. That's one option. But the Supreme Court said that's for the states to decide. You still don't look happy with my answer.
Inverse condemnation is a way to get redress from that.
Yeah, that gets you money, but doesn't get your property back.
Yeah.
I thought you were asking.
But that's only if they can meet that burden.
But the issue with the
If they
flooding,
come back
yeah.
and say it's still police power,
But the issue with the flooding is the government says we only temporarily occupied your land. The water was there for 1 week, 5 days, whatever it happens to be. I thought you were asking if that makes your house inhabitable because there's mold and other conditions, right? Because a lot of people, their houses, you can't return to it.
So let's use that as an example. What happens then? Even
If it's only temporary, then you basically have to go. Okay, so if it's temporary, we have a class next week, Penn Central, and that test. I'm summarizing. That test basically says, as long as you get some value from your property, the government wins. So you can still use it, and maybe just not in that house, but you can use it for something else. So if, in other words, if you fit within the bucket of the permanent physical occupation, it's categorical, it's automatic. If it's only temporary, it's pensential, which is, I keep saying it, but basically it's our test for next week, which we'll study in class on, I guess, Monday.
But it's considered temporary, and that's subjective to
Yeah.
the government.
Yeah, and more likely than not, it'll be police power, right? It might be a taking under pensential, but it's probably not. Probably don't have to pay you for it. I saw a lot of fans. Aaron, was your hand up?
Is that how they justified taking the land of Native Americans?
I'm sorry?
So under police power, was it like for reservations?
Oh, are you talking about back in the day?
Yeah.
So the question was about taking lands of Native Americans. We did Johnson versus Mcintosh. Remember that case, the first week of class? That was an act of conquest. I don't even know if that's police power. I mean, that's just, it's an act of pure conquest. I saw my hands. Yeah, Rachel?
How temporary does temporary
I don't know. It's not. This is actually the issue with the Harvey issue. Is flooding for 1 week? Is water sitting there for 1 week temporary or not?
Well, because I know, like, I live in West Houston, and a lot of the neighborhoods around me were flooded for like 3 or 4 weeks because they
Yeah.
continued to
Release.
reservoirs.
Yeah,
And
someplace up to a
there
month.
were-
Yeah.
There were certain areas around Highway 6 that like you couldn't access for like 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I live not too far from there. I know, and the entire Beltway was basically underwater for like a month. Yeah, so I mean, that's the question. If your house is underwater for a month, at what point is it no longer temporary? There's no good case on this, which is why the litigation Andrew mentioned is going through the courts, right? Because usually when the government releases water for flooding, it's over in a day or so. And it's usually not on a residential neighborhood. It's like in a farm or something, right? But Houston's unique in that you had to have these releases in residential areas who were not in floodplains, right? And a lot of these places didn't have flood insurance because they were not on the floodplain. They had no reason to have flood insurance. They had no reason to actually even prepare for this because they weren't on a floodplain. It's just the fact that they chose to flood this neighborhood and not that one. The government's defended them, and I always try and give both sides, saying, well, we had to flood someone. And if we didn't flood you, we'd flood you. Right? We had to flood someone. And they chose to flood these neighborhoods, and I couldn't tell you why and whether these decisions were well thought out. But it is 6 weeks. I'll just take your number, right? Is 6 weeks, is that permanent or is that temporary? Again, if you say, well, the water eventually went away, then everything's temporary, right? If that's the case, then flooding can never be permanent, and flooding can never be a taking, which is why I'm keeping a very close eye on this litigation.
That's because, they say that it's going to keep happening. That they're going to keep, like,
Releasing.
the more that we get, storms and flooding and stuff, they're going to have to keep releasing it. Since neighborhoods are going to continuously flood like that, so it seems more permanent.
Oh, you're saying that the risk becomes permanent, not just the actual taking, but the risk of future floodings.
Mm-hmm. Because, like, even though, like, the water itself is temporary, like, it's the event of flooding is more permanent because it's going to keep happening.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, I don't have a good answer. I know this is an issue that's very close to home, literally, but I don't have good answers. I will keep a close eye on this. And if you do, in fact, have water for 6 weeks, now the flip side is every time there's a hurricane, now the government has to pay for this, right? There's a cost to the taxpayer to this, and maybe flood insurance would be a better solution than takings litigation, right? Because takings litigation takes years to get compensation. Maybe the government just has mandatory flood insurance for these neighborhoods, and then if there's a flood, they just pay them out of that. It's a lot easier to pay out of an insurance fund than it is to pay out of a takings judgment, which could take years to appeal. But again, the key point here is these people were not in a floodplain, and that's an important point. Like, there's certain, I bought a house recently, there's certain areas where you are required to purchase flood insurance. It's actually done through FEMA because private brokers won't actually sell these policies. And if you're not in one of these areas, you can buy a policy, but it's not mandatory, right? I didn't have to buy one, but I bought one anyway because, God, who knows? It's not that expensive. But these people had no need for it. Okay, any other questions on this? I'm not done with Loretta yet. We'll get back to the dissent by Justice Blackmun in a minute. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, Blackmun. Anyone else? Oh, where the hell was it? Alec, you next? Alec, all right. All right, walk me through the Blackmun dissent, please.
So basically, he's just talking about how the distinction between a temporary or a permanent occupation, there is no guideline laid out for that, and so he goes into the definitions of what is permanent, what is temporary, and basically saying that with a temporary occupation, there is a system you go, it's part of it's part of like a balancing test. You take out the factors that could be going into the decision based on where it's temporary, whereas if it's permanent, it's just like a per se rule. If you meet the criteria, then there is no other circumstance that can go into decision making. And so that outline about the case just leaves liability for future tenant and residential relationships.
Very good, very good. So Justice Blackmun's dissent basically argues that there is no line, right? The line that the court draws between a permanent physical occupation and a temporary physical invasion is not administrable, right? Courts can't implement that. He calls it a quibble. He would apply a balancing test of some sort. And he would ask whether basically the benefits outweigh the burdens. And he cites certain difficulties. For example, can they make a government install smoke detector, sprinklers, example I gave you for the poll question. And these are questions not really examined by the majority. So the upshot of this case, right, the upshot of this case is if you are a property owner, you're going to try very hard to say, Your Honor, this is a categorical taking. Why? Because it's easy. Once you get yourself into the categorical bucket, you're done. You're home free. You win, right? The government has to pay you money. The government will always say, no, 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 no. This is not categorical. It's police power. We have a balancing test. We measure the benefits and the burdens. And because there's some benefit that's reserved for the property owner, you're fine. So much of the litigation here is deciding which category you fit in. Are you in category 1 or category number 2? Okay. So any questions on the first case, Loretto? Okay. Let's go on to the next case. Katie, you want to give me the facts, please? And I love this. I love the facts of this case. Raisins, right? Let them eat raisins. No, let them make wine. I love. You don't read many Roberts Baines, but he's a good writer. He drives me crazy, but the guy can write. When he's on a case I'm not mad at him for, he's a very good writer. Otherwise, I get too angry. But Katie, why? Obamacare. Katie, give me the facts, please, in Horn.
Okay, so there's a statute that allowed the government to take personal property in order to stabilize markets and certain agricultural.
What property are they taking? Let's just be precise. What kind of agricultural property? Raisins, thank you. Yeah, go on.
And so they did take raisins from the plaintiffs who produced raisins, and then they, without compensating them, so they sued the government, saying that it was a unconstitutional taking and that they deserved compensation for it.
Okay, very good. So let me just give you some background. I'm sure you studied in con law the case of Wicker v. Filburn, one of my favorite cases to teach. And this case involved the Agricultural Adjustment Act, under which the government said to farmers, you can only grow so much wheat in a year. If you grow more than this, we'll hit you with a penalty. This is a fairly common New Deal policy. The idea was, well, the farmers are struggling, so the way to help the farmers is to limit supply. And if we limit supply, there'll be less food in the market and prices will go up and everything will be great. Okay, we don't have to be economics here, but that's the idea behind it, right? If you restrict supply, it increases the prices and the farmers get more money. So the Agricultural Adjustment Act is not exactly with us, but there are other similar policies that are in effect. And the The Agricultural Marketing Agreement Act of 1937 has what are called marketing orders, where the government decides how much raisins a farmer can grow every year. Now, this isn't like Wickard, right? It's not where they penalize the farmer for growing too many raisins. Instead, they say, if you grow raisins above a certain quantity, you have to hand them over to the government, and the government will sell them probably in a foreign market so as not to interfere with the American raisin market. And if there's any excess profits throughout the entire raisin industry, you get a cut, right? You get a slice of that pie. So it's not exactly the same deal as in Wickard, but it feels the same way, where if you grow too much, you don't get to sell it, and maybe you'll get some money back from it later. So it's similar, but there's some important differences, right? So the facts here, in 2002, the Horns refused to sell their raisins to the government, or to refuse to hand over the raisins. The government shows up with a truck at 8 o'clock in the morning. They say, get lost. They say, okay, fine. We'll hit you with a penalty equal to the value of the missing raisins, almost $500,000, as well as a penalty of $200,000. That's a lot of raisins, right? It's a lot of raisins. I don't know how much raisins that it's a lot. And a penalty of $200,000 for disobeying the order. They challenged this as a taking. Now, as a threshold matter, they kept the raisins, right? This wasn't a case where the government took the raisins and they sued for a taking. They had the raisins, right? They kept them. Where's the taking? They were penalized for not following a government order, but they kept the raisins. So Kendra, why is there even a taking here?
I guess because in the past they've done it, or because they are taking their money, I guess.
But they're not taking their money. They're fining them.
To me, that looks like the government's taking their money.
Well, it's a fine. If you don't follow the law, you pay a fine. Does the government take your money if you pay a parking ticket or a speeding ticket? So next time you get a speeding ticket and you're challenged as a taking, yeah, don't take the bar with that one.
So is it because they were limited in what they could do with their property?
Yeah, I think that's right. Even though they kept this batch of raisins, this regime, right, this rule applies to them prospectively and ongoing. So basically argue it's an ongoing taking regime where they're basically forced to give a choice, either give up the property or pay some money, right? But again, it is a strange thing, and I think Sotomayor gets to this in dissent a little bit, that they got to keep the raisins. But the court found by an 8-1 vote that this was actually a taking. So the first question that they have to address is, does the categorical rule apply to personal property? These are raisins. These are not real property, as in Lackacre, right? These are raisins. These are personal property. So, Lauren?
Yes.
Does the court find that this categorical rule from Loretto applies to personal property?
Yes.
Okay. Why?
I just know it's yes, but it's like essentially like personal property versus property. It's the same.
Yeah, very good, very good. Right, the word private property in the takings clause applies to both real property and personal property alike. I'll just take a detour, not this is relevant, but I had a case over the summer which involved 3D printed guns and the files used to make them. And I actually had to make an argument that, a government license was a form of property. And there were some courts where they held that, oh, no, property in this statute is limited to real property. I'm like, no, wrong. And I had this. So you never know, like the bizarre places, things you learn will be cited. You never think, but the property professor helped. Okay. All right. So the court first finds that, yes, it applies to personal property and real property alike. Chief Justice Roberts cites Magna Carta and all these old statutes about corn and cattle and livestock. He's a good writer. He makes me happy sometimes. Other times not so happy. Then the court says here that this is a clear physical taking because the actual raisins are transferred from the growers to the government. Now, if the government wanted to, they could just prohibit you from growing these raisins and fine you, which is what happened in Wickard. But here they didn't. The key point here is that they were seizing the property. Because they were seizing it, that implicated the takings clause. Okay? Now, Rachel, let me ask you this question. After the raisins are taken, the government sells them on the open market, foreign markets, and then gives some money back to the growers. Is that compensation? What does Robert say?
It's not compensation because it's not the actual.
Yes. Is there going to be money paid out every time? Is there always going to be money paid out? Always? No. The answer is no. Okay, so fine. Depending on market conditions, there might not be any money actually paid out. So it's not actually compensation. In the same way that the $1 in Loretto wasn't actually compensation on a case-by-case basis, the money paid out by the raisin sales will not be compensation. All right, so Joey, we have private property. We don't have just compensation. Is this a taking?
This is a taking.
And how do we know that?
Because the government is actually taking the raisins and forcing the raisins to be turned over. They're not providing any kind of compensation for it.
Yeah.
There's no distinguishing between real or personal property, so.
Is there any balancing that we have to think about the benefits and the burdens to the government here?
They kind of talked about different balancing, like if a product is unsafe when they're talking about the pesticides.
But in this case, does the court consider whether this is a really important program for the government? Does it matter?
No.
Okay. Doesn't matter. No balancing. When you have a categorical per se rule, it's what's called a per se taking, right? And you'll see this. You'll see it all different ways. You say it a categorical taking, a per se taking. You see it written different ways, right? This is a categorical per se taking. It's automatic. The benefits and burdens are relevant, right? It's not enough to say, well, instead of growing raisins, they can grow, plums or something else, right? You don't grow raisins. You grow grapes, right? You don't. That's true, right? You grow grapes and you shrivel them. Is that? When I was in high school, I remember someone told us this. The SAT had all these nature questions, which New Yorkers just don't know, farm stuff. So there was actually a gap in certain SAT questions where people in regions don't get those things right. Yes, you don't plant raisins. That Josh, you don't do that. Okay. So you could grow something else. You can grow, apples. I don't know, something else that are not subject to these quotas. Okay. And so the court finds that this is unconstitutional. And because there's no guarantee that the program generates a profit, there's no compensation, and they ruled in favor of the growers. Okay, there was a big dissent. The vote was 8-1 on the big picture, but it's split where Justices Breyer, Ginsburg, and Kagan didn't agree on the compensation. And Justice Breyer wrote that the marketing order may in fact give compensation for the taking of raisins. So there was a dispute about this. We'll get to the Sotomayor dissent in a minute. But are there any questions on the majority or the Breyer concurrence, or partial concurrence, I should say? But this is why we should be teaching this in common law. This is common law. This is not property. There's nothing property about this. This should be in common law. But maybe next year we'll get there. Oh, by the way, let me ask you. So there's maybe one proposal that might change, and this is, again, I'm telling you stuff I shouldn't be telling you, but I respect your opinions, it's worth it. Instead of having 3 hours of property and 3 hours of property, one proposal is to do 4 and 2. Ooh. Do 4 hours in your first year, your second semester, which basically cover everything that's currently in property 1, plus maybe adverse possession, a few other topics. And then all these sort of real estate stuff like easements and zoning and covenants goes in a separate class you can take any time you want. Mandatory. Like real estate transaction type thing.
It would still be mandatory though?
Yeah, but you can take it in your third or fourth or fifth semester whenever you want. So you have more flexibility. Takings would be removed altogether, put in common law, in the expanded common law. So that's my theory or proposal. That instead of having 3 and 3, you have 4 and 2. You have 4 hours of property your first year, your second semester. And then you have to take a 2-hour call it real estate transactions, which is going to be easements, covenants, land use, zoning, and maybe one or two other topics. So the 1L probably gets bigger, but this class, what we're taking now, goes into 2L, maybe even 3L. And the upshot is, I think you'd use a different case book. It's not going to be a case book, it'll be more of like a practical book on real estate transactions. I have to maybe do some heavy lifting, but that's my current proposal, because we currently have a 4-hour gap because of SIFPRO moving around in the 1L, and I'll squeeze property in there and just rejigger it.
I like that. I was wondering if there were going to be 2 4-hour classes then.
Oh God, no, not 8 hours. No. 4 plus 2.
Yeah.
4 plus 2 is 6, and then you just do takings and con law.
No. I meant 4 hours, like 4 hours of con law and 4 hours.
No,
of
you're gonna have 6 hours total of con law and 6 hours of property still. In other words, instead of doing 3 and 3, you do 4 and 2 of property. You just split it differently.
Right. I'm just wondering if there's going to be 2 4-hour classes in the same semester. Like if
No, because in your second, basically the way it would work is that all of your first hour classes, all the first year classes would be 3 except for property, which is 4.
Okay.
So in other words, right now, so going back to your spring semester, right? You had 4 hours of con law and 3 hours of property, right? It would just be flipped. You had 4 hours of property and 3 hours of con law, 3 hours of civil procedure, 3 hours of contracts, etc. Yeah, it's like a puzzle trying to fit this all together. There's no good way of doing it. But the reason why I like this better is it gives you flexibility so that in your third semester you have a little bit more room for elective. And you can perhaps take something you want and kick the real estate class later on. I don't know. That it might not work. Not everyone agrees with me, but if anyone has ideas, you can ask me about later.
So this property 2 would become like
it wouldn't be called it would be called
like a pro reg.
Yeah, it's a mandatory upper level class. But you can take it at your exactly like freshman responsibility, exactly. You can take it at your discretion, maybe your third semester, maybe your fourth semester. So let's say you want to go into property, you take it your second year. If you want to go into crim, maybe you take it your third year, right? So you get another crim class in your second year. It just frees up an elective slot. And by doing 4 hours in your first year, you basically get all the future interests and rule against perpetuities, all that stuff out of the way. I don't know, that's my idea. And no disrespect to you, but I sense a difference teaching this class 1L and 2L. There's a very different attitude of students 1L and 2L. So the more I can get you in 1L, that's better. Now you guys are actually pretty good, but I've had 2Ls before that aren't so hot for teaching them properly. It's true. Every class is different. It's true. Different personalities. It varies. I couldn't tell you why. I've taught the same class twice in the same day, and it's a completely different world. It's remarkable. Completely different evaluations, different everything. It's the damnedest thing. And I'm the same person giving the same lecture twice in a day. Same reading, and just completely different class. We're at different paces. I can't explain it. Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, boy. Did you have a morning class last year?
No, but people who had you for con law last semester in the morning, one time where you made them come in at 7 or 8 for like a makeup class.
Oh, I made them come in a little bit early. Oh, that's what they complain about. Please. Oh, boy. Just wait till you graduate. All right. You have to come in early for lots of things. My goodness. Okay. All right, what else? Any other ideas on that? Again, I'm giving you this because I like you and I respect your opinions, but none of this may ever come to anything. We're discussing. These things take a long time. And someone asked me, she stepped out, do the 1Ls, currently 1Ls have to take tax, and I don't know the answer. I don't know. I don't know the answer. Okay, what else? Let's do the Sotomayor dissent, right? Who am I up to? All right, Gabe, what's Justice Sotomayor write about in her dissent?
You said that Loretta.
You say he?
She.
She. Okay, I thought I heard he. Yeah, no, it's a she.
That Loretta in particular didn't apply to this case.
Okay. Why is a Loretto test not applied here?
Because it requires that the government action in question must completely destroy all of the property rights, and in this case it didn't.
Did Loretto say that? No, it didn't. This opinion drives me nuts. I remember reading, I was at the United Terminal E, I was reading, I was like, this can't be right. I got very angry when I read this dissent. Justice Sotomayor reads Loretto in a way that I've never read it. She says that it requires that each and every property right must be destroyed before there's a taking. Right? The entire bundle of sticks has to be destroyed. I read Loretto, you read Loretto 5 minutes ago. It doesn't say that. I don't know where she gets this from. That's all I have to say. Like, I don't know. I remember being very angry when I read this. Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have to say about it. Okay. Anything else on the Raisin case? Yeah.
So when I read it, it was kind of, especially for just compensation, kind of like, okay, we're going to take your car that you're going to sell, and then we're going to sell it and make money, and we're going to give you some of that back. Like, it didn't make sense. And then when they talked about, well, the money, what we're doing helps you because you're in the the market is selling raisins, and so you want the market to be, healthier.
Yeah.
And so that was in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the government's idea here is that you're actually benefiting the same way. I think this was Kendra's question a few minutes ago. The same way that having cable in your building benefits you, having this raisin resale market benefits you, right? Because it results in higher prices for your income. But again, who gets to decide what's better for me or the state? And at least in Loretto and in the raisin cases, decide that the individual can decide what's best for them, not the government. Yes, Kendra?
So this one isn't okay because they take it and they don't pay, but like the wheat case in the 40s or whatever.
Wickard, yeah.
That one's okay because they don't take the wheat, they just say.
If you grow it, we'll penalize you.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Sotomayor says, well, wait a minute, if they can penalize you for not growing it, isn't it just more fair to pay you something, right? In Wickard, the farmer had to pay for the excess wheat. And in here, the horns might actually get some money out of it. And then the chief says in response, the means matter. The way you go about doing it makes a difference. And then that's the distinction they draw. Hail to the chief. Did I tell you about O'Connor and Rehnquist? Did I mention that in this class? No? Yes? Anyway, well, just a brief aside, because I read this morning, I couldn't believe it. So Justice O'Connor and Rehnquist actually dated in law school. They dated. They went to Stanford together. What I didn't know, this came out this morning. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. They went on 40 dates in 40 days. Whoa. Whoa. That's intense. But it gets crazier. This wasn't released till today. I read this this morning. I couldn't believe it. One more. He proposed to her in a letter. She said no. She said no. But he basically wrote to her, Sandy, we should get married, in a letter. And she said no, and then she married someone else. But 40 dates in 40 days? My God. That's a lot. I mean, that's... But then they served in the court together. Seriously. Apparently, lots of guys were courting her. There weren't, well, let's take a step back. There weren't many women in law school back then. And she was very smart, and you can look at her picture. But she was an object of affection. Yeah, she was an object of affection at the school. And apparently, and I read this also, apparently Rehnquist recommended to Reagan to put her on the court. So, I mean, maybe there's, yeah. I know, right? This morning, Nina Totenberg just blew my mind. I hadn't heard this stuff ever before. But anyway, go on. Just go to NPR, listen to the story. It's a very good story. Is that, you see it? Anyway, okay. What else? Anything else on Loretto or the Raisin case? All right, Dan, let's do the last case, Hattercheck. Yeah.
Okay.
Hattercheck, please. Give me the facts.
Yeah, so there was an owner of some land that had a bunch of expensive brick underneath the property.
Clay. Yeah. And by the way, the way you make bricks is by baking clay. Again, I don't. You bake the clay and you make a brick. All right, go on.
So he set up like a brick kiln to
Yeah.
extract the clay and make bricks.
Yeah.
And the city set up an ordinance that told him he couldn't do that.
Okay, what was the city's justification to tell him that he couldn't make the he couldn't run his brickyard anymore?
It was basically like a nuisance to the city.
Okay, very good. They said it was a nuisance to the city. And Zach, yeah.
Sorry.
See, if there's no name tag, I can't learn your name. It's a problem. Zach.
I thought this would make it better. Like we have to go over it every class. So.
No, it's worse because I have the visual. I'm a visual learner. Zach. Was there actually any pollution or noise or smoke or things that were bothering the neighbors from this brickyard?
There actually wasn't.
There wasn't. Right. So usually when we did nuisance, and you guys did this in torts, by the way, in my new world of property, I just removed nuisance also, just keep it in torts because we do it twice. Right. We move a lot of stuff out. But anyway, in nuisance law, generally a person has to bring a nuisance suit when there's actually a nuisance. But can the government proactively ban something because there might be a nuisance? That's the question here, right? The government's saying, well, even if there's no nuisance in this case, we find that generally the act of baking bricks inside the city limits is potentially injurious to the public welfare. So we're going to stop it. Even though you've been doing this for years, we're going to stop it. And the court here agrees. And they find that there's no taking. They find that there must be progress. Look at this quote, right? By the way, Justice McKenna joined the Lochner majority, which I always love when I read this opinion. He says, there must be progress. And if in its march private interests are in the way, they must yield to the public good. My God, get out of the way, right? Effectively, this is a nuisance per se. That the mere act of having a brickyard in city limits is a nuisance, and the government can ban it. And because this law is not arbitrary or unjust, it will be upheld. Okay? Therefore, there's no taking. Now, you might say, wait a minute, Josh, how does this make sense, right? This guy had a brickyard that was making a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. I did the math. It's worth almost $20 million in present-day value. Right? This is not a trivial amount. Right? Like 18-something million dollars, right? How can it be, Josh, that Miss Loretto, if they put a stupid little cable on the side of her wall, gets a taking, but in How to Check, they tell you, you can't use your valuable land for what it's used for. It's for baking clay. You can't use it for anything. You can't farm there. Right? The soil's not good for farming. So all you can do, make clay. That you get nothing. And this is one of the, to use Brittany's word, unfairness of property law, right? Where if you fit within this categorical bucket, you get money, you get a compensation. Maybe not a lot, but you get something. But here, they can basically reduce the value of your property down to almost zero, right? It was worth $20 million if you can put clay on it. If you can't put clay, it's worth basically zero. You can live on it, maybe make a house resident, but you can't do much with it. So you have to start thinking about is, what category are you thinking in? If this is trying to eliminate a common law nuisance, it's police power, and you get nothing. If it's a permanent physical occupation, you get money. If it's a temporary physical invasion, maybe you get money, maybe you don't. And if you think this is confusing, right? So we have this permanent physical occupation, the temporary physical invasion, and also the nuisance test. I'll just call this the How to Check test, right? You have to start thinking about, where are you fitting yourself in? And these are not bright lines. As you read for class on Monday and do Penn Central, start trying to think of how narrow this category is, right? And how broad this category can become. Because the government can define just about anything as a nuisance. There's a lot of land use that does not then require any compensation. What was that?
No, my chair made a really loud noise.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
I see. I had a teacher in 7th grade who just let a match in class. Anyway. Yeah. Maybe I'm less funny in the morning. I don't know. Anything else? All right. I'll see you guys on Monday, or Saturday. I don't know which one. I'll see you maybe sooner.